Welcome to the Midlife Pilot Podcast. What is it like to become a pilot in midlife? The challenges are unique, but so are the rewards. Hosts Ben, Brian, and Ted talk learning to fly, growing as pilots, and the joy of flying to destinations. The purpose of the podcast is not to teach, but to share knowledge and experiences. After all, should you take advice from people who fly planes that are named the Egg, Lucy, or the Beast? I think not. Okay, checklists are complete. Let's get the show started.
Welcome to episode 64 of the Midlife Pilot Podcast, where we talk all things flying and aviation in midlife. My name is Ben. I'm a commercial pilot in Atlanta, flying a Cessna 182 I like to call the Beast, as you heard in the intro. Tonight, as always, we have Brian, a private pilot, tailwheel rated pilot, living in Nashville, home of the Bachelorette Super Charlie, flies a Cherokee 180 named Lucy. Hello, Brian.
How's it going? And by the way, each episode you go between saying tailwheel endorsed or tailwheel rated. And, it's an endorsement. I wish it was a rating, but I just wanted to make sure we weren't getting any, false advertising.
It's a fine line between those two. I guess that's a area of gap that I have in my knowledge.
No, but I'm here and I'm glad to be here. And how's it going?
And you're looking well.
Oh, thanks.
Absolutely. Also looking well, we have Ted, our sport pilot extraordinaire, with a beautiful lit up mat in his background, which I'll have one of those one of these days soon, I hope. He's coming to us from Portlandia, flying a CTLS we like to call the Egg. Hey, Ted.
Hey, how you doing?
I am good.
I am decidedly less glitchy tonight. And my connection's less glitchy as well.
Less glitch is better. We'll go right into housekeeping. Follow or subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. We'd love to read it on a future episode. Everything now is on our website at midlifepilotpodcast.com. There you can send us feedback, learn about our Patreon levels, and possibly join us, and get the latest on the events, especially with the fly-in coming up at the end of April. You can catch our live stream and be part of our live chat. We've got quite an active group tonight. And we're usually doing this on YouTube Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, Midlife Pilot at Midlife Pilot Podcast on YouTube. So you can just search that up. Guys, how's your week been? Has it been since 2 days ago when we last recorded?
Hey, listen, by the way, everything's fine, but the glitches that you were talking about, Ted, I swear our episode fail I think it was a good thing. It forced, some things to kind of get sorted out, but I still picture you. Were you one of those people that back in the day was shotgunning 256K modems, and feeling like you were really like the internet kingpin?
Oh man, when I was a teen, I remember running an extra phone line into my room. Like there was a little spot in the attic, and so I had a dedicated phone line to dial in with my modem. Like those were the days.
So people forget about how in that weird period of overlap with the internet and telephone lines, how you could be online and then somebody would pick up the phone because they wanted to use it, and you're no longer online. And then and I remember my family was, we didn't have really the funds to have a second phone line. This is even before the computer thing started happening. But do you remember a thing called, what was it called? It was called the Ringmaster system. And basically you got a separate discrete phone number that would call into still the same physical phone line, but the ring pattern would be a double ring, and therefore you knew it was the kids, a call for the kids or something. Did you ever have anything like that?
I didn't, but we also didn't have call waiting, and I always hated that when you're with someone and you'd hear that click, or they'd suddenly get distracted. And
One of my
the worst.
One of my favorite pastimes when I was in middle school was we would go into the phone book, and with our three-way calling, we'd call John Smith in the phone book, and then as soon as John Smith picked up you would just say, oh, hold on a second. And then you click off, call the other John Smith, they pick up, then you connect them, and then you just mute the phone and let whatever's going to happen. And it got into very abstract pairings. You would call like a church and a bookstore or whatever. You could do it a lot of different ways. But anyway, I was just reminiscing about that. But I just feel like your internet situation, I just thought he was probably shotgunning 56K modems back in the day.
Oh man. Yeah. Yeah. Those modem days that was quite the thing.
Ben still
forever to download.
I remember downloading my very first song, and I remember the song. It was "Fade Into You" by Mazzy Star. And it was like a 4-hour download. And even if I had call waiting, but even when somebody tried to call in, it would disrupt that internet connection. So it would get like 3/4 of the way through, and then somebody would call in, and then I'd have to start all over.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I started downloading it at like 2:00 in the morning, and then just wake up the next day. That was about the only way I could get it done. Crazy times. Tonight, we're going to start off in our mailbox. We got some feedback. I'll go ahead and take this one. And we got some feedback from William E. And he writes, first time listener here. You can thank OB. Thank you, OB. I was listening to episode 62 about complacency and your discussion about another individual entering the traffic pattern via crosswind. I'm assuming that he was following the guidance of the Airplane Flying Handbook, figure 83B, and on page 85. I've used this technique a few times. However, I do not prefer it and certainly wouldn't use it if anyone else was in the pattern. Enjoying the show so far. Keep up the good work. And, he sent us, or Ted looked up those figures, and I'm glad we've got a few, we've got at least one CFI in the chat that I know of. When I first heard the term, the crosswind entry, I thought they were talking about on the normal departure into the runway crosswind section, thinking, why would you ever do that? But then it kind of melded into my brain that, it's a midfield crosswind is what I typically do. And so that's what I really think threw me off, and it kind of cleared the picture up.
Yeah, that kind of took, I looked at the diagram and I couldn't figure it out. And Brian actually came in and pointed to the text, who actually reads the text in there. In the text is where it says crosswind entry. So when you look at the diagram, it's 8-3B of just doing your midfield entry, right? It's where you're at pattern height and you just turn immediately into the downwind. Well, what I didn't think about was what's the leg just before the downwind? It's the crosswind. So they're talking about crosswind entry, just saying that leg that you're flying in, they're calling that a crosswind. And I just don't think of midfield as being crosswind. I think of that as being no part of the pattern. So, yeah.
I agree. Yeah. I think this came from the thing that I was talking about where I was flying into Music City Executive, and I actually had my first sort of snarky radio moment that I always said I would never do. But I just remember saying something to the guy about, he was basically saying, are you number two? And I basically said, if you're entering the pattern on the crosswind, then yeah, I guess I am, But in my head, thinking about it exactly the same as you, the crosswind to me is a structural element of a box pattern, and it is only in one place. And there might be some sort of conflation between the direct midfield downwind entry, and some people either colloquially, or if there is a means to talk about it in the book that way, then I guess it can be talked about. I don't know. To me, that's something that just needs to get sorted out because it doesn't make any sense to me. And then to stack on top of that, there's been a lot of chatter lately by some people that I love to hear and some that I'm, less interested, but good point that for flight teardrop entry is a little bit problematic. That is not in the book, and that is becoming radio speak and understood language of intention. And So that presents its own little challenge. And I do think, as a side note, that a teardrop entry, most people don't go far enough away from the airport to do that. And so they are definitely looking at, especially if you're in a low wing and you're descending close to the downwind. I don't see how that's good, but that's sort of a separate fish to fry. But I really am glad that he brought this up. But I still think that William here with the, I still don't see this as sanctioned. I don't. It doesn't make sense. I don't feel like this is resolved. Ted, is this resolved?
Well, let me just read what it says in the text, which is an alternate method is to enter on a midfield crosswind at pattern altitude. And it goes on to talk about turning into downwind. Don't use it if the pattern's busy. So the book itself is not helping by calling it a midfield crosswind at pattern altitude.
Well, I think
it's
the word
using
midfield,
the term crosswind right there. Yeah, exactly. It's the word crosswind that I think is throwing us off.
As long as it's qualified with midfield, I'm okay with that. But you can't just have me imagining which crosswind now that you're talking about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and heaven forbid that we're now using ForeFlight in place of the airplane flying handbook based on doing what it says or doesn't say to do. So, I think it really kind of depends on your plane, where you're coming in. I will do a teardrop if I'm in high. If I'm going to be at least 500 feet above the pattern altitude, I'll go out and do a teardrop. If I'm at pattern altitude when I get to the airport and there's not very many planes, then I'm going to do a midfield crosswind entry and just turn right into the downwind. So again, everybody has their own way. It sounds like both ways are perfectly fine. I enjoy the teardrop more. I just think it's it's more fun to fly that.
Ted, didn't it also say something about if the pattern's busy?
Yes. Yeah, it says not to do it if it's busy.
I don't understand why there's those kind of, for the sanctioned handbook, there shouldn't be those kind of ambiguities, right? They're everywhere, and we have to figure that out. But what's busy? I mean, I would say 3 or 4 planes in the pattern here is not totally busy. I mean, it's busy, but it's not. I don't know what's busy.
Yeah.
What does Nathan Ballard have to say? Yeah.
I'm of the let's use common sense and do what the situation demands to be safe. And I couldn't agree with more. If you're in a low wing plane, then maybe you come in at pattern altitude. And if you're in high wing plane, maybe you come in a little bit higher than pattern altitude because that's going to provide you the best visibility possible. Just my 2 cents.
I'll tell you, one of the other things that makes a difference besides how busy it is how long the runway is. Because if you come in midfield on Chris C's 3 mile long runway, you've got plenty of time for a good downwind. Try doing that at a 2,000 foot runway, midfield, and then you're still turning. You already need to be descending by the time you get to that. You're done with your downwind at that point.
What's the roll rate in your egg? I mean, come on, get with it.
Yes.
Well, let's why don't we move on? Use that as a segue into that. That is a knowledge gap that we just refreshed. But tonight's topic is our knowledge gaps and fixing our knowledge gaps. And I thought I would go ahead and start off. I've got 2 areas. As soon as we were talking about show topics and this came up, I immediately knew what was where I lack. And I'm at a point now in my flying where it's not learning the stuff to pass a test. It's now learning the stuff to be better at what I'm doing. And the 2 areas that I want to work on is number 1, weather. I feel like I know it pretty well. I'm a little over 1,000 hours into this whole gig, and I know when I can fly and when I can't fly. But I want to understand it. I want to just understand the systems a little bit better. I don't want to be a weather expert. And I'm going to go ahead and give a shout out to AeroSafe and CFI Erica Gilbert. I watch a lot of her videos, and I watch them repeatedly just to get that feel of the overarching weather system and how it relates to what's going on with me. I think she does a really, really good job with that. I think all pilots could probably get a little bit better in briefing the weather. because I mean, even the experts barely understand it. It seems like sometimes.
Well, as a little insert there, I just want to say that I think what she does that's so great is I think a lot of us have a decent weather basis to work from, but there's something about seeing someone on a scaled level articulate perfectly and systematically and interrelationally, breaking it all down. She's so easily conversational about it in a way that I feel like I would be kind of doing an awkward book report if I was forced to do what she's doing, right? But she's able to. So I think that just by even observing someone that is just speaking so well through it, it helps you organize the hierarchy of analysis at the same time.
On the last video she posted, there was a section kind of up towards you, maybe on the eastern side of the Rockies, where there were isobars really close together. And then she went and did the wind shear and low level turbulence. And she's like, see what I'm talking about? Those lines close together. Now here's the weather. That's a result. And it clicked with me. She presented it in a way that a knucklehead like myself can understand it. So that's really saying something, in my opinion.
Yeah, I like going from that entire country view, that overview of the whole thing, rather than what my brain can handle, which is, okay, what's happening at my airport in the next 24 hours. That's as much as I can handle. Yeah.
My other gap, I feel very comfortable flying IFR. But I've recently been introduced to a couple of different things and doing different deeper dives into approach charts and how are you going to approach this. And I've started reading IFR magazine, and it presents these scenarios. And when I look at these scenarios, I'm like, I have no idea what they're talking about. Now, the likelihood of me of flying this approach in Colorado in the mountains is probably not very likely, but I feel still like I need to know this stuff. Not 100%, but I need to have a better understanding than I do right now. And there's so much to it. When you look at a VFR sectional chart, there's 1 million points of data in any given section of that chart. And you could spend days on end looking at different things on the VFR chart. Well, I think IFR is the same with the different approaches. And there's so much more for me to learn. I feel like I'm a safe pilot when it comes to IFR, and I'm ready to fly it any day of the week. But I think there's still a lot more out there that I need to know.
Ben, Wendell Geek has a question for you here.
Ben, do you need to know this stuff now, or do you need to make sure you brief it before you fly into it? I need to brief the stuff that I'm flying into, but a lot of the stuff that I fly into is not very complex. It's pretty straightforward stuff. But I do want to be prepared for the time that when I do come into a place with a complex IFR, with a complex approach with terrain and different issues. I'll give you another example. So there is a place that, and I wrote into Opposing Bases about this because I didn't really understand what was going on. Apalachicola, which is Alpha Foxtrot, we were flying into over Thanksgiving, and they have 6 approaches. They have 3 different runways or 3 different paved surfaces, 6 different runways. Actually, I think it's only 4 different approaches, and they're all RNAV. But every single one of them was NOTAM'd out for not authorized at night straight in approaches. And I couldn't understand why. I thought maybe it was noise abatement. I didn't know. And it turns out there are trees at each departure end that violates the 3-degree or whatever the glide slope is for that airport that could be an obstruction. And so you have to be able to visually see it. And so it's noted out that that's not authorized at night. I didn't know that. And it kind of opened my eyes to, well, what else do I don't know? You know what I mean? I feel like I wasn't going to fly IFR in there at night, but I want to know why.
Well, Ben, since you are the only instrument rated pilot on this here podcast, this ramshackle podcast of underachievers, Josh has a comment here. I thought maybe you could put your expertise on. He says, my knowledge gap is IFR flying in and out of untowered airfields. I have done hundreds of IFR flights to towered airports, but I think maybe 3 or 4 to untowered, and it still intimidates me.
Yeah, I get it. I have spent a lot of time. I think maybe half my flights are IFR flights in IMC are at untowered fields, at least so far. And Josh, it's just like everything else in aviation. Repetition is the mother of all learning. You do it a couple more times and you'll just get more and more comfortable with it. But it's, when I've learned over the years, when I'm flying into an airport and the controllers will give me a phone number to call to cancel, I'll ask them, is this a phone number I call to pick up my clearance going out? Or is there a frequency? You kind of learn little tips and tricks. I would say the majority of the time, though, when it is IFR, the ceilings are high enough where I can take off and remain VFR and pick my IFR up in the air. I found that, and it's going to vary from sector to sector, but I think a lot of the controllers kind of like that. Because someone's manning the phone that's different, that's going to be controlling you maybe. I don't know how the staffing is, but it seems like it's a preferred method if possible. But if you're not, I know the EFBs, I use Garmin Pilot, and I know most people use ForeFlight. They have the phone numbers into the TRACON that you can call in. And it's really, the clearances you're reading back, hold for release, if not off in so many minutes. It's just a couple of extra lines that you got to say to let them know. But again, you do it another 3 or 4 times, Josh, and you'll probably have it down. You'll have it better than me, probably. So what about you guys? Where are your knowledge gaps?
I mean,
I know it's an hour show.
I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good.
Yeah. You got a lot of them, or could we fill 3 days worth, or is it just you already know it all?
I think every pilot has their strengths and weaknesses that they bring into it that are really just carry-throughs of the type of person that they are or the type of learner that they are. And I have found, it seems like, especially for midlife pilots, all of you software engineers and coders seem to really take to IFR procedural flying in a very, very clean, easy way. Whereas for someone like me that lives a little bit more in maybe the abstract of life and all of that, as much as I do have a deep appreciation for systematic things and technical things and, all that, there's just something about it that, doesn't compute very well with my brain, and I'm working on it. But I will say this, that for now, it's going to be a minute before I can pursue an instrument rating for, reasons. And all that being said, I still have these gaps that, even though I'm not in active, hot pursuit of that rating, I want to be, but I just can't. But I have gaps in my cursory instrument flying knowledge that I think would help me a lot, especially in busy airspace as a VFR pilot. And so I think that would be the gap that I would probably highlight here, which is to say, as a VFR pilot in waiting to be an instrument rated pilot, I still would like to get to the point where I can, fly. I haven't flown practice approaches maybe once or something. I don't know. It's like I haven't done any of that stuff. And so, there's that part of it. And then also the awareness that you get, especially at more remote fields or untowered fields, the airport where Lucy is based is Bravo Whiskey Golf. It's intersecting runways with an ILS on runway 3. And people are coming through all the time, even when the winds are prevailing the other direction. And are they doing a circle to land? What does that really mean? How are they cutting out? Like, there's just a lot of nuances about the sort of feathered knowledge between or the place where IFR and VFR kind of blend, especially in the practice environment, to be able to better understand what's happening at airports and to be able to set myself up properly to either allow people more space or time, or when there's a problem and when there's not. I think that that's a gap that I have, that I wish that there was I just don't have the people around me immediately to help me with this unless I hire them, I suppose. But which is totally possible. But it's just, again, I'm lucky to even be a partial owner of an airplane and buy the gas that I do. But I really would like to have a little bit more of a cursory knowledge of IFR flying to help me be a better citizen and a better participant in the system, knowing those things. And I do flight following everywhere all the time. I do all the things that I know how to do and to be as harmonious in the NAS as I can possibly be. I definitely am. But I definitely understand that, it's kind of a brain stretch for me when I hear a fix and I'm like, okay, well, where is that? And how do I find that? I don't even have that chart. Like, why would I even have that up? Right. So, now I've got to change this over and I'm trying to figure out where this person is. So, but yeah, so, and Ben, I'd like your comment on this, but I'll read it. Todd has a great comment here. IFR pilots in VFR conditions should explain themselves in VFR terms. That is a pet peeve of mine, he says. I agree. I think that there's almost like a subtle hierarchical pushing or shoving that kind of happens, where it's like, I'm going to stay so nebulous that you're just going to have to wonder what I'm doing. But what do you think about that, Ben?
I am an IFR pilot, and it drives me crazy, if that tells you anything. I've noticed that there's like corporate jets that are coming into an untowered field. They'll call out that they're on a 6-mile final. But when student IFR student, calls and reports that they're at the final approach fix, that means nothing to hardly anybody. That, I don't know if you're on a 3-mile final, if you're on a 6-mile final, that tells me nothing, and it drives me crazy. The circle to land, it did bother me when I was a VFR pilot, but after you've gone through it, all they're doing is just entering on the downwind to fly on the other runway, and that's the nuts and bolts of it. But
well, I have a question even about that.
Yeah.
So in that, where are people typically breaking off and joining? Are they joining at the sort of point of, is it midfield? Is it?
When they break out of the clouds. When you get visual in the airport, then it's dependent.
But where are they joining?
They're on final approach.
Yeah.
And then they're going to just sidestep to the right and join in on the downwind.
So they're basically
going to break off if you're doing a left downwind, okay?
Yeah.
And you're on final approach, you're going to make a slight turn to the right and then just enter the downwind from there.
See, this is that's the extent of which I totally understand, but it does not offer me the clarity that I need when I'm in that area, which is where are you joining at? Are you starting in the downwind at the crosswind to downwind turn angle? Are you going, how low are you going on your runway approach? And then are you scooting over and are you climbing back up to pattern altitude? Or are you below pattern altitude? Are you above? And are you joining at midfield? Are you just kind of, I don't know, are you descending from above?
I think we need a disclaimer here.
Downwind?
I think we are not CFIs.
Yeah.
And we are not arbiters of the FAR aim. But the way I was trained is when you're doing a circling approach, the field conditions, basically, you have to have the field in sight and you should be at pattern altitude because you're now mixing yourself in with the VFR traffic and you need to play by the VFR rules. So is that what everybody does? I don't know, but that's how I was trained.
So where do you enter on the
circling minimums, are much higher than what your IFR minimums are.
But where do you enter on the downwind if you're doing a circle to land?
Think of it, you're basically, I don't know how you would describe, I mean, if you're a 5 mile final, then you're just going to step to the right and be on the downwind. So I don't know where you would call that.
So it's just a really super extended early downwind.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess in my mind, I feel like this is again because I don't know these things, right? Gaps in my knowledge. But it's like, are they? I picture people coming down pretty close to the runway, or at least getting below pattern altitude on the final approach before they're breaking off to circle to land. That's what. Right. So in my mind, I'm seeing people come down on short final and then jumping back up into the downwind and around, but that's not what people do.
No, that is not what people do. And good. And our friend Nathan calls it out.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ted. I'll be an expert here. Actually, I won't, but I'll read what the expert said. I'll read what our favorite CFII said, Nathan Ballard. He said, if it's a practice approach, the pilot and their decision to break it off is like Forrest Gump's box of chocolates, random. They can choose when to do it. It is weird when you don't know what angle they're coming in because they're not always lined up completely 180 from where you're landing to. And yeah, those are the things. It's always interesting because you say you're at a fix. You tell me a fix. I don't even know how to look it up because you're not spelling it out. And if you know the 20 fixes in the area, you can find it. But if you don't, how do you find it?
Look, I've got one fix memorized, and it's the final approach fix to 27. And I know the distance it is to the airport. And the only time that's going to matter is when it's IFR, and there aren't going to be any VFR planes in the area anyway. So, but that's what upsets me. Anywhere else, I don't know. And I know how to look it up, but I don't want to go. Just tell me how far you're from the airport. You've got that on your EFB or on your panel. Tell us. So,
yeah. Tell us in your 7.36 miles or whatever.
I've heard that. I've heard something like that. But
speaking of Nathan Ballard, he gave us some feedback. We were talking about knowledge gaps, and he gave kind of a list of a good overview from his point of view, and puts it into categories. So first category is ATC and NAS, the airspace. What to pay attention to, its opposing bases, of course, but also take the time to read ATC 7110 document. Totally worth the read. I'll put a link to that in the doobly-doo. Some of you have probably Googled it by accident and found it. If you haven't read it, it's a good place. We were talking, a week ago about a tower giving me suggested vectors and why they were very clear on the word suggested. And sure enough, you can see the recommendation in there about they can only suggest a heading for you in those circumstances. So 7110 is great to get the terminology and see why they say things in a very particular way. The next category that Nathan gave is engines and airplane ownership. Not part of the ACS. Listen to the Ask the ANPs podcast at double speed. Nathan says, listen to Mike Bush's webinars on YouTube. And I'll add Mike Bush's books as well. He's got a series of 4 or 5 books, and it's all about how to own a plane and what to think about, and especially to follow his opinion on how to maintain a plane. And then his last category is being nice. He said, if you want to know what it's like to learn and fly during midlife, just listen to Brian, Ted, and Ben. Well, thanks, Nathan. I guess we're experts on one thing. It's being midlife. Yeah,
that's right.
Some of us have that nailed down more than others.
Yeah.
We, and I'm speaking of myself because I think I'm more midlife than you guys are. We've got another feedback from a Patreon, Biff. He says, initially, I was thinking that I likely didn't have much to offer on this topic question as a sapling version of a pilot. Since this portion of the journey is all about just gaining further experience, So it isn't necessarily a gap, he uses air quotes, so much as a wide open expanse. However, Nate's comment made me think and realize that I had already started trying to fill other gaps. Since getting my ticket, I have read Mike Bush's manifesto and started on engines. So yes, all of the flying is one thing, but without even realizing it, I had already started doing a deep dive into other related topics. In this case, to try to understand more about the machines themselves. I think it's a great point. And it kind of gets back to what I was saying earlier. I know what weather I can fly in and what I can't fly in, but I want to understand more about weather and how they develop so I can have a clearer picture of it. So
I think what I really like about the distinction Biff is drawing there real quickly is just that we don't want to talk about our knowledge gaps as if they are unaddressable or that they are accepted and as a new status quo. So I love that. That's a good way to sort of start to turn the corner on this topic and to kind of wrap it up is to say, first step obviously is recognizing you have a problem. But then you gotta do something about it. So, I think that's part of just the psychology of being a burgeoning pilot and growing in that experience and having a healthy conversation with yourself. I would imagine a CFI is going to be a lot better of a resource for you than this podcast. We always like to reiterate that. If you have knowledge gaps, you're going to have things that you did in training that you forget, a lot of things actually. So get those refresher trainings and get back up there with a CFI. Have one on call like we do, it's way cheaper. No, but Nathan, thank you for all your help, and Erica also, and any of the other CFIs that have joined us in our Discord and readily answer questions. Really, really appreciate it. And you guys are incidentally giving value to this Patreon community in a way that we could never provide. So we really appreciate that. But with knowledge gaps, it comes opportunity. So we'll get after those things.
I don't think it really matters where you are in your journey. I think, I've referred to my brother-in-law flying the plane after being behind the yoke of a 757 and flaring a Cessna 182 at 300 feet off the ground because that's the sight picture he's used to. There's knowledge gaps there. I don't think it really matters where you are in your pilot journey. There's going to be areas of rust that you need to go fill back, relearn or knock the rust off, so to speak. So I think it applies to everybody, no matter how many hours you have. So,
yeah. I try to seek out the things that I'm not as familiar with, and that can be attending wing seminars or reading, accident reports or rereading Parts of Killing Zone. And those are the reminders for me of the things that I'm forgetting. I worry about the unknown unknowns, which is I think I'm just blissfully going along my way and I think I'm good at this. But how do I know that I'm not? And having a CFI helps. Reading and continually learning helps with that as well, at least for me.
Yeah. And make the most of your time in the plane when you're in cruise. If you're going somewhere. Yep. I was just on a little bit of a flight the other day and I was just by myself drilling flow call outs for various emergencies, just saying them out loud and then checking them against the checklist. And I don't know, just there's always an opportunity to pick up a little something or refresh a little something.
And I'm glad you mentioned that. I didn't mention this on the last episode. So when I was flying back from Savannah to Atlanta last week with only 3 engine mount bolts, which, by the way, quick update, the Beast should be ready to go by Thursday.
Oh, wow.
Or it's just going to be really nasty weather, but that's okay.
So they're doing one bolt a day?
Yeah, bolt a day. That's what we're getting. But so the airspace, when I was going down there was, they wouldn't let me into Atlanta's airspace. And as it turns out, there was a NASCAR race at Atlanta Motor Speedway on the south side of Atlanta. But so when I'm coming back, I took off, it was IFR, but the weather was improving. And I sat and listened to the traffic controller that was routing all this traffic into Hampton Speedway. There's an airport literally on the property of the racetrack. And it was a work of art. I don't know who it was at A80, Atlanta TradeCon, but he built a picture for every pilot on that frequency of where the planes were without trying. I mean, it was just doing his job. But I knew exactly, without looking at my EFB, I knew exactly what everybody was doing. And it was also interesting to me as one plane got a visual and he cleared him for a visual, and the relief on this controller's in his voice was palpable, because now he didn't have to wait for somebody to cancel IFR. Everybody was cleared visual. And when I signed off, when he transferred me to the next sector, I was like, dude, you are crushing it. It was, but even when you're in cruise, and to your point, Brian, when nothing's going on, just listen to the radio and try to build a mental picture. That's going to help you participate in the NAS. That's just an area that we can all get better at. I'm not saying that there's knowledge gaps per se, but that doesn't mean you can't get better at doing something.
Love it. And Chris C., great comment here real quick. I just wanted to throw in, he says, I thought when I completed my PPL, I'd be done with CFIs for a while. I was wrong. I've enjoyed working with another CFI to help knock off the rust and learn new things. That's really, it's really what it is. You know, I think that some pilots, when they get done with their certificate, their private certificate, I mean, it is important to get out there on your own and start to, you know, be independent. But I think that early on, there's an association with that is maybe negative for some pilots, you know, like I thought I was done with school kind of thing. And you just got to really, I mean, they say license to learn and it's just like a cliche, but it is really, really, really important to keep CFIs close and to continue the learning. So, and definitely don't take a lot of advice from this podcast. We're just talking here. We don't have long legal disclaimers, but we sprinkle it enough in here to where I think if anybody came after us legally, they would just take one listen at what's going on. And they're like, yeah, these guys are not, you should know. Yeah.
You should have known better. That's exactly what they're going to tell them.
I keep a list of things I want to work on the next time I'm up with a CFI, things that are hard to do on my own, things I want them to teach me, things I want to practice. And I've always had that list since before I had my ticket and still now. There's things that I want to practice with the CFI. And so that's it's always good to kind of have that list of things that you know you want to improve, as well as them sitting with you and breaking habits. FL Ferris said, at my current 15 hours, the knowledge gap is wide. I'd be happy with consistent takeoffs and landings. Yeah, that's entirely fair. At 15 hours, I felt that way too. And you could argue I still feel that way, but it gets slightly better, at least. I think that's, in my experience, the more you flew, the more consistent it got, right? It's not that you got good at them, but at least they were consistent.
I want to comment on another comment from Biff, and I like that this was brought up. And Tyler Snowden as well mentioned this. Wings, the program by the FAA. It's why he loves the Wings program. I've done like 4 of them, and every time I watch one or read through one, I'm like, I need to do this more often. I do. I love them. I just don't know. I don't know why. I guess I kind of forget about them. But that's a great point. And I'm glad y'all brought that up.
I get a lot of kind of newsletters or notifications about the Wings program events. And if they're interesting, I'll jump on them. But I actually am going to be working with this new CFI. And I said, hey, are you available last weekend? He said, no, I'm going to be 100 miles away doing seminars. And so I actually flew to this convention and So I did 3 wing seminars back to back at that. And so I tend to have a lot more of those than I'll actually use. More of kind of that knowledge side. But
I'd really like to start building them up credits. Well, what else do we have? That really, I think we covered that topic pretty well, don't you think?
Yeah, I do.
Anything else we need to cover on that? Oh,
no,
there he is.
I think we can start wrapping. And
well, want to give everybody a quick reminder. We're going to keep talking about it because we're all very excited. The Nashville Fly-In, April 26th through the 28th. You can go to our website at midlifepilotpodcast.com. We've got a lot of information in there. It seems like the crowd is growing every week, and it's really pretty incredible. Let us know, when we get a little bit closer to the date. I think we're going to update our information, and we want to try to get a closer head count, but it's still pretty far out, and I think we'll wait a little bit before we do that. But sounds like a lot of people are coming, and I'm really, really getting excited about it. So
yeah, it's going to be fun. I think it was Cheryl that was saying that she had purchased airline tickets to come, and so it's like kind of some of those where it's like, wow, people are actually coming to this thing and actually doing things to come to it. That's amazing.
It's I keep looking on Nashville, different like the Chamber of Commerce and all their different publication websites, that there's some other big event going on, and that's what these people are really coming here for. They're not really coming here to hang out with us, but we just happen to have a couple of recommendations, and they may pop their head in. But yeah, it does feel kind of weird that this many people are coming. All right. Well, next week we'll be talking all about the Sport Pilot. And everybody in the chat, thank you for joining us tonight. It was great to see a lot of old faces and a few new faces. So signing off, episode 64 of the Midlife Pilot Podcast. Good night, everybody.